guys, today we're going to talk about the most common vitamin deficiencies that make you die sooner. Yes, they make you die sooner because a lot of these deficiencies are associated with age-related diseases that could have been prevented if you had adequate levels of these vitamins and micronutrients in your system. And I'm going to go through the top 7 micronutrients that are most common here in the West and that are related to age-related diseases. So a lot of this information I am pretty much getting verbatim from this book titled The Longevity Code. That's where I'm getting this information from. It's written by a doctor, and this whole book is basically about the latest research that has to do with anti-aging and how to live longer. It's one of the best health books I've ever read, I'll be honest. And I've read a lot of different health books. This author doesn't seem to have any type of dietary agenda. He just seems to be very impartial and just strictly looking at the research and the evidence for what causes aging and how to slow aging, the best ways to slow aging. This information is from a section in the book called the Longevity Staircase. So the first stair in the staircase is actually filling in these common deficiencies that are pretty rampant in the West. Even though we have an abundance of calories, we have an abundance of macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, many people have a lack of very key micronutrients that are very important for the optimal functioning of our body. So I'm going to touch on each vitamin, the richest sources of them that you can get in your diet, and whether or not it is worth supplementing, because the author touches on that. Sometimes it really isn't worth supplementing, and the research suggests that it really makes no difference whether or not you supplement with some of these vitamins and micronutrients. So I will be discussing all of that. So let's get right into the top 7 micronutrients or vitamins that you may be deficient in. The first is B vitamins. Now, the B vitamins form a family. Vitamin B1, B2, B5, B6, B9, B7, rewind, B7. B9 is also known as folic acid and also B11. Why? I don't know. And of course, B12. A lot of these micronutrients bind to proteins in our body to enable them to work properly. Proteins basically do everything in our body. They build, they repair, they metabolize, they run our immune system. So if they don't have the right micronutrients to function properly, then they're not going to function properly, and you're going to have issues with certain systems in your body. B vitamins are very, very important for our brain because B vitamins bind to the proteins that run our metabolism. And a lot of our metabolism, most of our metabolism actually happens in our brain. It needs a lot of glucose. So if we have a lack of B vitamins, it is actually associated with major brain shrinkage. And there was actually a study that found that people who had low levels of vitamin B12 in their blood had a 6 times greater brain shrinkage as opposed to people who had normal levels of vitamin B12. And brain shrinkage is pretty strongly related to early death. Okay, so obviously B vitamins are super important. Is supplementing worth it? The author says yes, there is some evidence that supplementing can be helpful, but he really strongly recommends taking a vitamin B complex, and that's because all the B vitamins work with one another synergistically. So if you're gonna go and make an effort to supplement with vitamin B, make sure it is the whole family and the whole vitamin B complex supplement. But the author says that there's lots of foods that are rich in vitamin B. It's not absolutely necessary to supplement with it. So some of the best sources of vitamin B are seafoods such as salmon, mussel, and shrimp, oatmeal, vegetables, nuts and seeds, chicken, and eggs. The second micronutrient that a lot of people are deficient in is magnesium. And magnesium, like B vitamins, binds to certain proteins in our body to enable them to work properly. Magnesium in particular binds to proteins that metabolize our sugar. So there are a lot of studies that show that when people have adequate amounts of magnesium in their blood, they are able to process sugars better. And this is something that's really important because as we get older, our body isn't as good at processing sugars, and this makes us a lot more susceptible to a lot of age-related diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and dementia. So it's really important for our metabolizing proteins to have all the right micronutrients for them to work properly. Magnesium is also known for lowering blood pressure, and it can also reduce the risk of heart rhythm abnormalities, and this is another important cause of death for older people. So is supplementing worth it? The author concludes that yes, supplementing can be worth your time with magnesium. There's evidence that it does help, but he's very, very adamant about making sure you take the right form of magnesium. A lot of typical multivitamin supplements that you'll find at the drugstore actually have the wrong type of magnesium that our body cannot absorb. And the wrong type is magnesium oxide. Basically, this is hardly absorbed in the gut, and he says if you do make the effort to supplement, to make sure that you take the right form, which is magnesium malate, and he suggests taking 300 to 600 milligrams of magnesium per day. You can also get magnesium from your diet, and the author does point out that it's always best to get nutrients in your diet because there are cofactors that go along with these nutrients that enable your body to absorb these nutrients better and increase their activity in your body. So it's always best to get from food because food is synergistic and it's obviously meant to nourish our body. So foods that are very rich in magnesium are green leafy vegetables such as kale, Brussels sprouts, and spinach, nuts and seeds, as well as legumes. The next nutrient that a lot of people are deficient in is selenium. And selenium is kind of like a little antioxidant powerhouse, but not in the way that you think, not like typical antioxidants. The way that selenium works is that we actually have our own antioxidants that we create in our body. We have antioxidant proteins specifically for scavenging free radicals that we create, and they're 1,000 times more powerful than the antioxidants that we would get in food. So keep that in mind. You have your own anti-aging mechanisms built into your body. And these proteins do not work properly unless they have selenium to bind with them. So there have actually been studies that have shown that people who have adequate levels of selenium reduce their risk of cancer. The author suggests that it's best just to get selenium from food because selenium is a very powerful substance and it's easy to overdose on it. But if you do want to supplement with selenium, he suggests taking no more than 100 micrograms, that's micrograms, per day. The author seems to lean more towards getting it from your food because it's pretty easy. Brazil nuts are a very rich source of selenium. In fact, so rich that if you do want to get selenium this way, only eat maximum a few per week because selenium is very powerful. You can also get it from seeds and pits, seafood, salmon, sardines, tuna, crab, oysters, mussel, and squids, mushrooms, portobello, shiitake, and cremini. Now, let's talk about vitamin D. I'm sure you've all heard about vitamin D and that most people are deficient in it. Vitamin D is so important. It is involved in basically all the important processes in our body, such as our immune system, our metabolism, healthy bones and brain, and many other body processes. People with a lack of vitamin D are at a higher risk of a heart attack and other diseases like multiple sclerosis and diabetes. So you need vitamin D. It's really important. Is supplementing worth it? There have been numerous large studies that have shown that yes, supplementing with vitamin D does make a difference and it can decrease your mortality rate. However, and this is really important, take note of this, it has to be the right form. Again, it's about the form of the supplement. Vitamin D2 is the bad form. It actually increases mortality, so really steer clear of vitamin D2. You should go for vitamin D3. Now, in terms of the amounts, there are various recommendations. It's typically advised by our governments that you take around 400 to 800 units per day. However, a lot of researchers believe that that's not enough and that you should be taking about 2,000 units per day. So the author kind of lands in the middle and says, don't take any more than 8,000 units per day. So anywhere from like 2,000 to 8,000 units per day. Don't exceed 8,000 units because vitamin D is fat soluble. Your body cannot shed the excess through its urine like it would with water soluble vitamins. So be careful with taking too much vitamin D, but make sure you're taking enough. He recommends not getting vitamin D from the sun because the sun ages the skin, damages the skin, and of course that's associated with skin cancer. And he basically concludes that there just aren't very many foods that are high in vitamin D, and most foods contain very little vitamin D. He mentions mushrooms and salmon. That's all he mentions. So I think that of all of these micronutrients, this is the one that you should really consider supplementing with. The next vitamin we're going to talk about is vitamin K. And until recently, this was a pretty underrated vitamin that nobody ever talked about. Vitamin K is super important though, because vitamin K actually distributes calcium in our bodies. It is in charge of calcium distribution. So people who have low levels of vitamin K actually have brittle bones, and they also have calcified blood vessels. And that's because the calcium didn't go where it needed to go. There wasn't enough vitamin K to say, okay, go to the bones and don't calcify the blood vessels. Vitamin K is really important for really strong bones and also really strong blood vessels. Vitamin K has also been found to be really good for our mitochondria. That is the powerhouse of our cell, and that is what generates our energy basically. This is great because the longer our mitochondria remain healthy, the slower we age. And if you want to know why, I really highly recommend that you read the book, and I will link it below for you. The author leans more towards getting it from your food because there are lots of foods rich in vitamin K. There are two forms of vitamin K, vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. Vitamin K1 is found in plants, green leafy vegetables, Brussels sprouts, spinach, kale, herbs like parsley and basil. And then there's the other form, which is vitamin K2, and that is found in a lot of fermented foods. So for instance, fermented soybeans like natto, miso, and tempeh. It's also found in cheese, and I think it's also found in ghee, grass-fed butter. Those are really strong sources of vitamin K, but make sure you're getting adequate amounts of that in your diet. Moving on, let's talk about potassium. Again, I don't think a lot of people know that. Most people are pretty low in potassium, and it's not just about potassium, that's only half the story. It's the sodium to potassium ratio. We have a certain ratio of sodium to potassium that we need for our body to function optimally. In our ancestral days, the average person would consume 11 grams of potassium and only 0.7 grams of sodium. It's totally reversed today. Now we only consume, on an average, 2.5 grams of potassium and 4 grams of sodium. So it's completely flipped, and our body is not designed to run on this ratio. Too much sodium is related to lots of age-related diseases, especially to do with our cardiovascular system. Most commonly, high blood pressure. And this makes us a lot more susceptible to having a heart attack. So you'll always hear people, oh, I have high blood pressure, I need to cut my salt, but that's not the full story, because a lot of people cut their sodium but they don't increase their potassium, and there is literally no effect on their blood pressure. That's because of the lack of potassium. And potassium really is important. For each gram of potassium we eat per day, we decrease our risk of a stroke by 11%. The author believes that the best way to get adequate amounts of potassium is through our diet. There are so many foods abundant in potassium, such as green leafy vegetables, spinach, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts, beans and peas, fruit such as apricots, peaches, plums, raisins, avocado, and figs. He also recommends using potassium salt. You'll find this in health food stores, or even maybe your grocery store. You'll see it'll say potassium salt, and it'll be a mixture of 70% potassium chloride with 30% sodium chloride, so there's a better ratio of potassium to sodium. And just replacing this salt is a great step in rebalancing the ratios. So definitely look into getting that salt. I'll link it below for you. And last, this is also very important, is iodine. Most people in the West are rampantly deficient in iodine, and that's because our soils are depleted now. We're not getting iodine from our produce anymore. And basically the only source is through seafood, and many people don't like seafood. So if you're not a big fish or seafood eater, you should really seriously consider supplementing with iodine. Iodine is involved with proper functioning of our thyroid. It's also important for our metabolism and our energy level. So it is an important micronutrient that we need, and if we're not getting it through seafood, the author recommends supplementing with it of a daily dose of 150 to 200 micrograms per day. If you are vegan or vegetarian, you can get iodine from seafood through your food. So make sure you're eating seafood regularly or supplement. You guys are really serious about living longer and preventing these age-related diseases through your diet. Definitely take these 7 vitamins and micronutrients seriously, and seriously consider changing your diet or supplementing or whatever you need to do in order to get adequate amounts of these vitamins. If you guys enjoy anti-aging and nutrition videos, please subscribe. This is just the first video in a series of anti-aging videos that I'm gonna have about how to change things in your lifestyle in order to age as slowly as possible. So if you're interested in that, definitely subscribe. This is the first video in my anti-aging series. Okay, so I'll have more to come. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.